welcome to yet another video from Tech Plebs. In today's video, what we are introducing is a brand new concept called Your Facts. Now with Your Facts, what we intend to do is consolidate all of the comments you have had for the first review of any device, and going forward this will be the format where there will be one video review from my side, and then I will be asking you for your feedback, input, questions and topics that you want with regards to the laptop. Now before we get started, I would need to ask you to like the video, to hit subscribe. Of course, we need to keep the YouTube algorithmic gods happy and praise to them basically the fact that this is not the worst channel in the world. As this video will be very long in nature, the video is divided into chapters, so feel free to take a look at the timeline below. Alright, so let's get right into it. So one of the questions that has been strongly resounding across the channel is the RTX 3060 versus the RTX 3070. And some of the comments, Paulo, Anais, Mattia, Ahmad, and Korean, for which I cannot read whatsoever, which is, yes, compare those two graphics cards. Now, just for your information, if you want more details on synthetic benchmarks, we have some 3D Mark runs, CPU benchmarks like Cinebench and Geekbench. Check out the full review. So without further ado, let's get right into it. What you can see here is that the Legion 5 Pro with the 3070 scored the 122. Now what is nice to see that the 3060 performed quite admirably at 1920 by 1080, getting an average frame rate score of 109. Now the desktop of course got 150, which is a great score. And then what is nice to see here that the Triton with the 2080 Max-Q scored similar results. So in principle, what we're starting to see here as a theme is that if you select the 3060 RTX, you will be in fact getting pretty much a 2080 Max-Q. And what I would like to note here is that the Triton 500 was one of the best, if not the best performing Max-Q 2080 variant overall. And then we have some results here with the Blade 2070 and 2060, of course lower, but nevertheless great results. Now we can move on to Assassin's Creed Origins. Funnily enough, it's still a very demanding title here at Full HD at the Ultra preset, and again we can see the Legion 5 Pro with the 3070 at 112. Here we see a significant drop to the 3060 to 78 frames per second. On the other hand, again, it's still beating the Triton 2080 Max-Q, so in principle you could be having again a great laptop at that 1100 or 1200 euro mark, where you're getting basically 2080 equivalent and higher performance as opposed to the prior generation. So I think it could be potentially a great deal here. Again, the desktop scored quite well, and then the 2060, just for reference here, scored a 67, which again is not bad, but again it shows basically the potential in the prior generation where we had the 2060, and it did in fact score quite well. So now let's move on to Odyssey. Odyssey, again, pretty much a demanding title. Here we can see the 5 Pro with the 3070 RTX scoring a 73, which is again a great result because it's pretty much on par with the 2080 on the desktop. On the other hand, we have the Legion 5 Pro 3060 scoring a 60, which is well below the 73 mark. On the other hand, it's still basically in the realm of the Triton 2080 Max-Q design. So again, I think in my eyes, basically a great result here for the 3060. Now we move on to the Shadow of the Tomb Raider. Again, a great title. Here we have, of course, the highest preset with RTX and DLSS enabled. And we can see here now both results for both HD in black as well as QHD in yellow. And what we can see is that on the left-hand side with the Legion 5 Pro, we have approximately 107 frames at Full HD and then a drop to 100. Now the drop is more significant with the Legion 5 Pro with the 3060 from 101 to 91. On the other hand, the desktop 9900K has still a far stronger drop from 128 frames to 94 frames. Now, what is notable here is that pretty much the Legion 5 Pro with the 3060 is still in the same league as the Legion 5 Pro with the 3070, again indicating overall great performance and a great result at that. Now we move on to one of the classics, which is The Witcher 3. So what we can see here is that I loaded one of my saves that I've had, and what we ran here is the QHD resolution at Ultra preset just to show basically after 10 or so minutes what is the average frame rate, or what is the frame rate ticking at, so to speak. And here we have the 3070 at a 108, the desktop 9900 at a 114 with the RTX 2080, and the Legion 5 Pro with the 3060 somewhere in the middle, so to speak, with the 92, again being a great result because that means that you can have that amazing gaming experience with Witcher 3 running at 92 frames per second, which again, you can't really complain because is it noticeable the difference between 92 and 108? Yeah, not really, come on. Now on to Assassin's Creed Valhalla, one of the newest games on the list. What we can see on the left is the Legion 5 Pro, scoring an average FPS of 75. Then we move to the right to the Legion 5 Pro with the 3060 at 64, and then the desktop 9900 with 2080 RTX at 88 frames per second. Now the key outtake here for me is that of course the difference is there, both between the 3070 and the 3060. Again, but we are talking about small differences from 75 to 64, and then in QHD 62 to 50. Again, we're talking about a few settings that could be decreased so that the 3060 reaches the 3070's average frame rate. So again, great results for the 3060. I'm very happy to see that. Now we move on to one of the most demanding titles a few years back, which was Red Dead Redemption 2. Now on the left hand side we can see that the Legion 5 Pro with a 3070 scores a 79, which is again a great result. On the other hand, we have the desktop 9900K with the 2080 that scores an 83. So of course it's slightly faster, but on the other hand those differences are quite negligible. And then if you switch the QHD resolution, you have 64 and 66 between the 3070 and the 2080 RTX full-blown desktop GPU, which again is in my eyes a great result. Now if we target the 3060, we have 63 frames per second and 52 when it comes to QHD, but again we're talking about small differences here. I mean, we're talking about, 10 frames per second at the QHD resolution, but approximately 20 on HD, and again you can optimize that with settings. Next on the list is Metro Exodus, which was one of the titles that was used to benchmark a lot of PCs, and it does in fact have RTX and DLSS, so both of these were ran in sort of the highest / ultra quality preset. So what we can see here is again some great results for the 3060, because the 3070 scores an average of 49 at HD and 43 at QHD, whereas basically the 3060 variant scores a 45 and 36 at QHD respectively. Now we are talking about a 4-frame difference with regards to the HD resolution, and then we're talking about a 7 or so FPS difference when it comes to QHD. Now of course these are the settings that I wouldn't recommend to run the game, but the point is that when we are limited not by the CPU but by the GPU, the differences start to basically decrease, in the sense that a 3060 is performing basically excellently as opposed to the 3070, and then of course the 2080 here being the stalwart performer again is somewhere in between, so to speak. So again, great results for both the 3060 and 3070. Now on to the next question in your facts. With regards to esports title, Netanel writes, can you do an Apex benchmark? Then Produce, can you test the esports titles like CSGO, Valorant, Fortnite, Apex Legends? Now the thing is, with Fortnite I actually downloaded it on both devices or 3 devices, and it's just terrible. They want you to watch some cutscene in terms of a new season and stuff like this. It's just terrible because you can't skip it, and then within the game menu itself you really can't do anything about actually measuring the frame rate because everything is so variable. So we skipped Fortnite, and what we focused on was CSGO and Apex. So let's move on to Counter-Strike Global Offensive. Here again we can see some great results for all machines. For the Legion 5 Pro with a 3070 and the 8-core, we see a 377 at HD and a 308 at QHD. For the Legion 5 Pro with a 3060, we see a 330 versus 282 for QHD, and for the desktop 9900K 2080, we see a 445 versus 370. Again, if we now focus our results on the 3070 and 3060 variants of the Legion 5 Pro, there are great results, and in principle with the display refresh rate at 165 Hz, you're not really going to notice anything, that much different between the two. So again, for CSGO, if you're one of those people, and I love the game personally myself, then both of the machines will do you absolutely fine. Now we move on to Apex Legends. Again, a notoriously difficult title to benchmark because we had to use the notebook check reference guide in terms of using the training room, as well as delimiting the maximum FPS cap that is enabled by default in the game. But nevertheless, we have here some scores. For the Legion 5 Pro, again with the 3070, we see a 198 at HD and then a 143 at QHD. All of these again are always ran at the highest preset. And then for the Legion 5 Pro with the 3060, we do lose a bit when it comes to, both HD and QHD at 163 and 118. But again, this is something that you can easily solve by setting here and there. The desktop, just for reference, did a 216 and a 156. Now let's move on to the next fact. Comparison between the Legion 5 Pro 5600H 3060 and the 5 Pro 3800 and 3070 would be great. Is a possible gap worth 400 euros? And so the long short of it is, yes, if you are planning to game higher than QHD, so for example this ultra wide here, or if you're planning to do, CPU based rendering or any exporting or basically CPU based demanding tasks. And basically the principle here is that if you know that you need basically an 8 core and 8 gigabytes of VRAM. On the other hand, I have to say that if I was purchasing this device just for myself, for the use from the laptop screen, or if I had a QHD panel, I would be personally more than happy with the 3060. So don't go out there thinking that, the first thing I need to do is have the 3070, because as you have seen from the benchmark results, again, we are talking about small, or let's call it 10 to 15% gains here. Slightly more, depending on title, of course, but nevertheless, those are great results, and I don't think that if you are willing to change a setting here and there, that you will realistically notice the difference between a 3060 and a 3070, unless you're the type like me, where basically you're crazy about benchmarks, numbers, figures, and average wattage use in terms of your GPU, your boost clocks. In that case, of course, move to the 3070. Battery life. Bhavjot Singh Munjal writes, what's the battery life like considering you take it to the university office or something? Can one leave the adapter at home? No talk of battery life? Sudarshan Seshardri. Luca Nogala, what about noise and battery life? Live better. Will the 3060 model be more efficient? And how about battery life? So, with regards to the first question, will the 3060 model be more efficient? Slightly, but we're talking about negligible differences, because if you are running this off of the battery or internal battery, you're most probably going to be using the internal graphics processor unit or GPU, and therefore you're not going to see any difference whatsoever. On the other hand, if you're using it with the dedicated GPU, again, constraints apply, where basically anyways the performance will be limited by the fact that you will be running this off of the wattage from the internal battery, and therefore in my eyes there is negligible performance differences. And most importantly, with this specific laptop, it does support USB-C power delivery charging. Therefore, for all I care, you could charge it with basically a USB typical power brick, and you should not be limited just to carrying and traveling with the charger. But nevertheless, I ran some benchmarks just to give you a feeling for the actual battery life. So what we did is we kept the device in balance mode. The display was at 50% brightness with Bluetooth and VLAN on, and for each of the tests we stopped the battery at approximately 10% remaining level of battery, just to give again a more realistic feel for how the battery life will be in real life. So here we have on the left Witcher 3 at 81 minutes. And again, Witcher 3 was limited to approximately 27 frames per second at QHD. When I decreased the resolution for HD, it was approximately 36 frames per second. So again, you could absolutely game at that, but you would have only approximately 81 minutes. Now, on the other hand, we did a 30-minute HD YouTube loop with the dedicated GPU itself, and that lasted an astounding 214 minutes, or approximately 3.5 hours or so. So again, that was a fantastic result to see a gaming laptop perform as such, even with the dedicated GPU on, because again, remember that such laptops 3-4 years ago, that would be like a 2 hour and a half mark at best. So from that perspective, again, great result. Now, funnily enough, if we ran it just from the hybrid mode, or where we basically enabled only the iGPU to perform this task, it lasted approximately 370 minutes, which is just over 6 hours. So, in my eyes, yes, this test is never going to be ideal, because the way people use such laptops will differ from use case to use case. On the other hand, for this YouTube loop, we had 6 hours. So in my eyes, if you need it to last for, your word editing, your outlooks, etc., with with the integrated GPU, I'm sure that you can last basically a day. And again, it's a great result for a gaming laptop to have 370 minutes or so, despite it not having the largest battery, which is 99 watt hours, but it's having an 80 watt hour battery. Temperature, fan noise, and thermal throttling. Jasper writes, how does the CPU temps run on CSGO? Please check for me. I'm about to return my Razer Blade RTX 3060 because the CPU ramps up to 100 degrees on CSGO. Does it thermal throttle while gaming? Infinite X AJ. Now Dennis Can Chichar. Decent video, what about the fan noise? And then Kostis, been watching laptop reviews forever. Very nice thermal analysis. Ideally, I would like to see the temperature real time on games and other apps. Now, my friends here, basically the answer is it will not thermally throttle because it's a great thermal design. Now what you will see now is a video where I launched Cyberpunk for approximately 10 minutes or so just to show you a ramp up curve, and the CPU reaches I think a 91 or 92 and the GPU again like an 86, 87 with regards to temperature, which is again some great results you can see. So basically you shouldn't worry with this specific laptop when it comes to thermal throttling. A few minutes later. Now let's move on to coil whine. Jan Suchomel, nice review. What about coil whine? Coil whine from Silixo. So the thing is, the overall thermal design on the Legion 5 Pro means that the keyboard is not sucking in any air, and therefore there aren't any perforations between the keyboard deck as well as the bottom panel. So that's isolation factor number one. It simply means that unwanted noises from the keyboard deck will not go to you. Now on the other hand, what I did is I took my Rode Pro, and you will hear a video shortly, and recorded it from the back, and you can hear clearly noticeable coil whine. Now, is that an issue? No. Why? Because basically it's a Rode Micro recording it from the behind, nearly on the spots where you would notice the coil whine. Now, of course, your natural human ear will pick that up. On the other hand, when the laptop is laying on the, normally on the desk, you will not hear that, or at least I do not hear that with the unit that I had. Now, will you experience coil whine? You might, so it depends unit to unit, so please do the purchase inspection the first thing you get the laptop. So now onto the recording. Build quality. You sound like you're worried about build quality like I am. I really want one of these laptops, but I'm nervous. And another message from Claudia. A super excellent informative video. I want one of these exact laptops. Does Lenovo have reliability and quality issues with its gaming laptops that you know of? And then El Siggy, with what material is made the computer? Now, to answer Siggy first, the top is aluminum, the bottom is aluminum or metal, and the middle is plastic. Now with regards to Claudia, I'm not really concerned with the build quality on the Legion 5 Pro, but I'm not exactly happy with the plastic keyboard deck because I'm a bit afraid that, as the polyurethane or polycarbonate that is there on the keyboard deck and, you're moving with your hands on it, after maybe a year's time, it might start to develop a shine, which is something that I personally don't like. But in general, I'm not worried in terms of the quality of the fit and finish as well as the materials. I don't think it will break, I don't think it will crack or anything like that. The hinge itself is stiff, and again, no worries to be had here from my perspective. Now in terms of Lenovo quality reliability issues. Now I'm sorry to say that every laptop manufacturer, Dell, Razer, Acer, MSI, etc., Lenovo, all of the laptops that I've tested over the past years have had their own issues. So you cannot say that one brand is simply so much better than the other. Therefore, it is very important that you do the pre-purchase or purchase inspection once you get the device to ensure that the device meets your specific and personal expectations in terms of build quality, coil whine, and many other. So the top is made out of aluminum. It feels very sturdy. It's a thick grade of aluminum. Sometimes you feel that it's flimsy. In this case, you can feel that it's sturdy. The rear panel, a plastic panel, is made out of some form of polycarbonate. Again, feels like quality grade from my perspective. Then if we move on to the rear or the bottom of the chassis, this whole plate is made out of aluminum, or at least it's some form of metal. And then the sides So the vent area is made out of plastic. And if we open the laptop up, in terms of actual lid flex, it's very sturdy. I mean, minimally you can move it around, but again, nothing bad here from my perspective. And then sort of my biggest concern is the palm rest area. So the top here is made out of plastic. So I'm a bit worried that after extensive use and rubbing on the palm rest, you will have some wear. But in general, it's quite good. So I don't have any issues with regards to that. Availability. What is the point? Lenovo won't even let you buy it. Availability. 5 or 6 question marks. Leszek Domżał. Good job with this review. Also, the machine is super cool. A pity that there is no way to be purchased. So the point here is that a lot of people, or a lot of you, want to receive this laptop as soon as possible. Now, sadly, the availability is simply not there, which I fully understand on behalf of Lenovo and any other laptop manufacturer today. On the other hand, I would just say stay put. If you can manage to, retain whatever device you have today and wait for a period of 1 to 3 months, I'm sure you'll get your hands on one very soon. The next fact is downscaling, e.g. playing Full HD on a QHD panel. Now, Lord Squiggles, by the way, excellent and amazing name. How did the games look when you're downscaled to 1080p? Now, Norbert asks, how bad is the image quality when you play 1080p on a 16p laptop screen? Now, the long short of it is that you will now see a video comparison recorded by the Panasonic GH5 showing basically both resolutions on Witcher. And in my eyes, my personal view is that you should always run it at native resolution. Now, both of the configurations of the laptop, i.e. both a 3060 and 3070, will have enough horsepower to basically power any game at QHD resolution, in my opinion, if you fine tweak the settings. But with other titles, if you're hunting for highest FPS, I see the need of running it at HD. You will for sure notice it, at least with my eyes. Now, there are people who prefer, for example, textures, etc. above resolution. So in that case, you might get away with it playing on 1080p. But in my personal opinion, it's simply not worth it because you do receive a lot of jagged lines, especially when you have vertical or horizontal lines or textures or objects on the screen. And therefore, in my opinion, I would simply not play it that way. Webcam plus microphone. Mr. L.F asks. So as for the webcam and microphone test, you have to imagine myself being a Pikachu over here. So again, quality is, I would say, okay-ish. In terms of the audio, yeah, you have to rate that yourself. Now on to the next one. Can the hinge do a 180? Steven asks, can it lay down up to 180 degrees? Now, long short of it is no. But funnily enough, not even Lenovo knows, because if you visit the page for the Legion 5 Pro, you can clearly see here that they have an image showing the display completely laid flat. But it's very funny. I guess they're used to having laptops that can be laid down 180 degrees because there's obviously a hump here. I will show a brief video that I tried to do that just so you see that it obviously can't be laid flat, and that's that. Now on to the next fact. DPC latency. Tall Shy asked, brilliant review. The only thing I was missing was a DPC latency test. Hello Tech Plebs by Georgi Karashansky. Can you tell me, is it good for real-time audio? Can you test latency with Latency Mon for a few minutes? Thank you for the great review. Ask and ye shall receive. On the left-hand side, you can see Prime 95, and on the right, the results from Latency Mon. Now, the long gist of it is that the results are not the best. Basically, in any iteration that I have done, there is some latency. We have around 1,000 in this iteration, both running 4K video, running some websites, as well as this benchmark, so Prime. And then here we have another example where the latency is at 2,000. So again, it depends iteration to iteration. Now, the thing is not to over-exaggerate this, because basically by running Prime, that's the main reason why we see the increase over here. From my perspective, the laptop never exhibited any sort of signs of audio stuttering or anything else. I also render the previous video for the channel via this, that I haven't had any issues. So again, don't always look at Latency Mon. You should test it in your own use environment and then see there. But basically, these are not great results. These are not terrible results. Again, it's something that you need to take into account, but I wouldn't absolutely worry about that. So now we move on to the funnest section, which I'm calling various. TNT Thomas writes, I want the ThinkPad track point nipple and then it's perfect. Well, funnily enough, Lenovo does actually produce the T15, which is one of those, larger ThinkPad looking laptops with a 2080 and an Intel-based CPU. They're quite expensive, but in principle, yes, I can't wait until Lenovo realizes that we as customers potentially want a really ThinkPad looking design with exactly the same components. So very good point there. Pedro Reyes de Almeida. Hello again. Did you have the mux switch off when doing these tests or were you in hybrid mode? Of course, I had basically only the dedicated GPU, therefore hybrid mode was off. Abaj006. Who would have thought one day AMD laptop CPU would be faster than the Intel desktop CPU? Yes, I'm very happy for that because that brings competition into the CPU production and design environment, so I'm very happy AMD has managed as such. Indy Sever writes, hi, does HDMI port directly connected to the NVIDIA GPU? I mean, does it bypass the NVIDIA Optimus? I know Type-C port can do that, but Type-C cables are a bit expensive. So I want to use the HDMI port. So in principle, yes, absolutely, HDMI does bypass Optimus, so it's directly connected to the GPU, so you will not experience any parasitic losses. HGH writes, great review. The only thing I miss in the Vantage software is the ability to change power settings for the CPU, GPU, and the temperature reader. I fully agree with that point because some of the other laptops do have, all of your power limits and all of your dedicated settings towards the GPU and CPU, for example, overclocking features built into the software, for example, with MSI. On the other hand, in this specific case, I really believe that the laptop is optimized to the point where I'm just happy as a consumer now, not as an overclocker, not as a, let's call it PC enthusiast, that the laptop ships with a configuration that can easily handle basically both high CPU and GPU load, thus negating the necessity to change those power limits. It would be a nice feature to have nonetheless. Loud asks, why is the image blurred on the Mac when doing the sound test? Basically, you can see my whole face and I'm not ready for a full reveal. Maybe if I reach 10,000 or so subscribers, I will do that. But I really like Laub's comment here, made my day. Don't be shy. We're all just a bunch of chemicals. Then we move on to Alex Clark. Does the MacBook 16 USB charger work on the Legion 5 Pro? Well, in fact, it does. It does support the same power delivery standard, therefore it does work. Very informative review and nice mug. Well, for the Emperor with regards to the mug. Legion versus MacBook display. Why no compare screens with MacBook? Great review. Would you say this display is better than a MacBook Pro 16 in terms of clarity, accuracy, and smoothness? I love how you describe the fan noise. Yeah. Well, that's the whole point. Thanks very much, Allison. So the point here is that I will be able to do more detailed analysis if I have an X-Rite calibration device. So maybe I'll get that when I reach 2,000 subs, and I will get such a device. But the point here is that generally the two displays are very similar. I do prefer the display on the Legion 5 Pro. Why? Because it does have anti-glare, meaning it's not covered with glass, meaning it does not have reflections, and meaning you can use it in non-ideal conditions as opposed to the MacBook where you really need to ramp up the brightness to negate the fact of the reflections. In terms of color accuracy, in my eyes, they really are at the same level with a slight edge maybe to the MacBook, but in principle this is really an objective or subjective opinion. And in terms of smoothness and accuracy, oh my god, is the Legion 5 Pro simply that much better with 165 Hz refresh rate as well as general smoothness during operation. So I personally do prefer the screen on the Legion 5 Pro that much better. On to the last point, which is the next review. So I have in fact ordered a Lenovo Legion 7 with the 3080 165 watt TDP as well as 16 gigabytes of RAM, and I'm very curious how it will perform and whether it will be faster than the Cerberus that I have with the 2080 as well as 9900K. In terms of the next videos, please put all of your suggestions in the comment section below. And yeah, I really hope you like this FAQ. Wishing everybody a nice day, stay safe and take care. Bye bye.